So the carb plate, the kick plate, that little nib goes in, and that little hole right there goes on the bottom. It all lines up if you look at the carb. If you have any questions, just look at the carb and how it orients into the saw. You'll see here the carb goes in that way, so the hole should be there, and there's that little vent hole. Squeeze our fuel line back on. Slide our carb back in. Now is where we want to put in the actuators and hook up the final wire. Usually the way I do it, because you want to go underneath the metal cutoff switch, the ground. It's a little bit tight, but it goes right in. Press it down, lock it, see if it works. See that cutoff is rolling on the pawl there. Hook our cutoff wire back up so that when that's all the way up, the two are touching. That cuts the saw. Saw circuit is an open loop circuit, I guess you could say. When you click that, it breaks that loop. I'm not a real major scientist on the whole thing, but it's kind of how it works for me. This is a finger. It's just a matter of getting that. It helps too if you play with the switch and orient it. See, that slides right in. Now your choke is working again. You don't ever want to bend these things or try adjusting them. That could be a problem waiting to happen. Now we're going to push the boot cover forward and just slide the wire into its little spot where it likes to be so that it doesn't chafe too much. The problem with these 025s is the way the wires are set up, they do chafe at times. For that, I would just say be aware that that could happen and check it every now and then. The problem with that cover and getting all that to seat in correctly is because you have the plug wire in there too, so it could make things difficult getting everything back in. So that's another thing where you just want to kind of take it easy. Got ahead of myself there. Hook our throttle actuator in. Sit it flat, push it forward. There's a little slot right on the throttle. Push that down. You heard that. Now it works. And you want to test it. It's going to be a little tight when the choke's on. We're leaving the choke on so no stuff falls in to the port while we're doing this, because stuff could fall in down. You want to try to keep yourself clear of that possibility happening. It helps if you're not wearing long sleeves, because stuff could get on your sleeves and get in there. It's a little bit chilly today. So that's why I'm wearing long sleeves. And I'm being aware of that. And also, if you think that something went into there, keep your choke closed and take your air gun and just give it a little bit of a blow from the corner. If you blow from here, it'll go down in and it'll blow everything out. So there's that. We are looking for our fuel filter. While we were doing this, we have a dirty one here, but I had a second one. Is that the dirty? Yeah, that's the dirty one. I hold it up to the light and I can't hardly see anything through it. So that's where I know that that's the fuel filter that I prefer not to use. It's good to have a table like this for sorting all your stuff out. Put our cover on, give it a couple little pulls, make sure that's set in. Put our grommet in for our brake. I do that one first. Always, always, always. That was pretty much the reassembly of the saw. Besides the air filter and the back cover for the carb. Now it's going to take quite a bit of pulling and messing around to get the fuel to go through the saw because you have a dry saw right now. And I like to change my filters often. That fits nice and tight. We're going to leave the cover off for the fire up just because we might have to put some gas on the filter to get it to draw through. That was a matter of me outsmarting the cap and not the cap being stupid because they don't have a brain all the time. With the twist cap, eventually you can wear those out or poke a hole through them if you crack them. So we're going to give it a bunch of good pulls. It's got a lot of compression. It's a great motor. All right, already kicking over. Idle's really nice. How many pulls was that? Like 8 or 10? Idle's really good, so that's a good sign so far. A little bit more love. Yep. Got good air seal, that's good. Let it idle. Let it idle for a bit. Don't even hit the throttle. It'll stall. Just isn't over yet. You want all that stuff to work into the saw. Well, there, I did something backwards wiring wise. As usual, that's how things go in my neck of the woods. That little bit of stalliness that you heard was just the clutch hitting the brake because I didn't have the I didn't have the sprocket in. Always oil your bearings. Want to find the end of that little worm gear driver. And I always lift up and double check, and you can feel it press down. You can feel it lock itself down. And it's just a gentle thing. Now there's something wrong with the cutoff switch. There's something that I screwed up. All in all, the saw runs great. It's ready to rock and roll. I just use the clutch, the choke to stall it. Easy enough. And I will rewire it at some point. Probably going to rewire it now while I'm here. The way that these are supposed to work, this is your ground wire to the jug, and it goes to that little metal plate. And then when the metal plate makes contact to here, which goes here to your coil, it's supposed to shut you off because it's supposed to close that loop. I could be wrong on that. I'm not a wiring expert. But it runs great, and we'll be hooking the bar up and trying some stuff out with it here once the rain subsides. Now, in theory here, I'm missing a ground connection. So if I hook the ground connection to the side of the coil and to the block of the motor, this ground connection goes from there to there. In theory, that's what I did wrong. It's to close that loop, so we're going to try that. And my understanding of the circuitry of these saws, wiring from the pickup, which picks up the signal on the coil, back to the motor block, finishes that loop and reverses the poles. And when you make everything the same pole, then positive and negative are no longer working in conjunction. Well, that's what it was, guys. There's the little bridge wire that I just put in there. You saw me put in there. It's just a separate wire. Goes from the coil to the motor block, both grounded out poles. You know, don't get upset when stuff like that happens. Don't get confused about it. Just take it apart and redo it. Now we have plenty of oil coming out. That's a good thing. Like I said, this bar and chain, a little bit big for this application. And you notice here already, you see how the drive links are riding on top of the teeth on that bar sprocket. So what I'm going to do is grind that down just a little, because it is 3/8, but these teeth on this sprocket are made for a taller 3/8 chain. And now when I grind that down, I want to be very, very careful. Just take my time with it and then clean it out well. So that's what we're going to work on. Just very gently. You're just very gently taking those down just a little tiny bit. It's not a whole lot. It's just for the lower profile chain. It's still 3/8 pitch. It's still going to sit in there good. But But like I said, that is made for the taller, more aggressive chains. And this is where when you take something older, not exactly meant for what you're doing, and you modify it to make it work good, that's when things feel good too. Here I'm just showing sped up. Shows you how I'm shaping the tip of each tooth on that bar sprocket. Just taking down about 1/8 of an inch of metal on each one, if even that much. And there's where you don't want to overheat it. You don't want to grind off way too much on one and then not have it grinding on the others. You just want to take your time with it and until it fits. Keep testing it out. And I put 3-in-1 in there. Why? Because this is a brand new tip, and it did feel a little bit dry right out of the box. They don't really lube them up a whole lot. Give it a spin. Just give it a little bit of spin. Feels good. Feels like all the garbage is out of it, if there was any garbage in there. And put the chain back on, and even there's a little tiny bit of daylight, but I'm gonna go with it for now. And if it becomes, the only thing about that, the only reason I did that is for derailment, because the way that it was sitting on there, it was sitting up so far that it may be a derailment issue down the road as I'm using the chain. And this is a LP 3/8 pitch Pico chain. This chain's pretty beat up. It's been through a lot. With me, I've put it through a lot. I'm not guaranteeing that it's gonna work because I'm cranking it. Yeah, cranked it real tight and it did nothing. So now we want to just pull that right out. We don't need it. Sop up our oil here. Everything on these saws is star drive or Torx bit drive type deal. That's the same size bolt as for my ground wire. So you don't just want to fling that bolt off and get rid of it. You want to save it, because it will come in useful if you need a ground wire bolt if you start rebuilding another one of your part saws. Out of the many part saws I have, and I save the tension adjusters in boxes, mostly because if I ever sold a saw, then I would want to put it back on there. If I sold the saw with a stock bar, but doing this to a saw, putting a bar of this size on a saw like this, I would never sell the saw. A, because the saw is too useful to me as it is. I know how to fix it. I know how to repair it. The motor pushes that bar just fine for my use, the way that I run them. And the other thing is if I were to sell this saw to somebody, and still be honest and still be in the business of fixing saws and running saws, I would have to tell them, well, it did run with a big bar on it. It ran with a bar that was actually considered way too big for the saw, but I also modified the motor, so you know, then they'd be getting into a whole thing where, okay, you're made aware of it. That's that. So here is my big carving bar. Just give it a little bit of love. It's going to take time for that oil to get through. Well, that sounds good. Feels good. Yes, it's stalled out. The saw needs to warm up a little, and it may need some adjustment. Haven't run it in a while. Chain's loosened up. I'm going to tighten it up and then move my camera and go cut some stuff because it stopped raining out. There's where I'm going to warn you guys again. Doing things like this, you're taking a risk of ruining a saw. So if you do this, go into it knowing and running the saw like you might be ruining it. Alright, thanks for tuning in, and we're going to go out and cut some wood now. Alright, so this is another important thing here that we have talked about in the past. Chain width, chain height, all that stuff. This chain is worn out enough, being a Pico chain. It's not wide enough for the bar anymore because the teeth they're actually bent. This chain is completely beat, and you notice that it just wouldn't cut. So what we're going to do with that is cut a new chain for it before we get going rip-roaring with it and expecting it to work for us. It's all a work in progress with these type of setups and these type of things. I'm glad to have my saw back. Runs great. Feels good except for the pinch in the bar because the chain is shot. But that's going to happen with abuse and years. This chain is old. It's seen much better days. So I'd probably retire that chain, put a new one on. Thanks for hanging out, guys. There's the Super Carver. It's a super light saw, very nimble. Does very nice with a new chain on it. So probably just going to go buy a new chain, slap it on there. We'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out.